Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. I'm your host, Billy Keels. And you know what? If you want to become a commercial real estate pro, then guess what? You're going to want to listen to today's conversation until the very last word. Because you know what? Today's guest is not only the father of 4 that enjoys running, yoga, and also playing acoustic guitar. Like, that sounds really cool. We're going to find out more about that. He's also, in his over 15 years of experience in the real estate space, he's done everything from house hacking to flipping to acquisitions of single family residences. And he did all that before he found his focus, which is clearly today in commercial real estate investing space. He's the director of investment sales for Encore Real Estate Investments, as well as the CEO of CRE PRO, the CRE PRO course. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Mr. Dan Lewkowicz. Dan, welcome to the show, man.
Billy, thanks for having me. Really a pleasure to be here.
Hey, man, this is a lot of fun. I love your energy. I love the things that you've done, your experience, the fact that you're all over the nation and stuff like that. And I just really am looking forward to people to get to know even more about you. So as you know, Dan, I like to ask everybody kind of like the same 5 questions they're going to get to in the beginning, 3 at the end, and then kind of in the middle, you and I are going to chat about all kinds of things, commercial real estate, and you're even going to get a chance to tell your backstory. But before we do any of that, let's get right into question number 1, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And that really is, Dan, help us understand, where do you live in the United States?
So I live in Metro Detroit, Michigan.
Fantastic. I think that's near some Great Lakes, something like that, right?
That's right. Yep.
We know it. Neighbors to the north. So wonderful. Appreciate that. And then also, I guess question number 2 is, what is the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours, Dan?
Yeah. So my kids are with me for the summer and picked my kids up from camp yesterday, and they just all were in the car. They got in, they told me how great their day was and how happy they were to be here. And it's just that energy as a father to feel from your kids and to see that they're happy and also expressing gratitude. It was just a really great thing to be part of.
Man, I love that. And we are starting this summer very soon. We don't have 4 kids, but we'll be very, very busy as well. But glad that you were excited about that and got that positive energy as well. And all the best this summer, man. Summers are flying by really fast. So I gave a really high level overview of some of the things that you've done in your career, in your life, things like that. But you know what, Dan? I don't think anybody can tell your own backstory better than you. So if you could do us a favor and just take a couple minutes and help us to understand a little bit more about you, Dan, and also too, like some of the different decisions that you made to get to this point in your journey. And then you and I can see where we take it from there.
Sure. It's funny. I don't really think about this too much, but I graduated from college in 2006 with a BA in psychology. Actually, at the time, I was interested in before I graduated, becoming a medical researcher. I had an internship and got a grant to do some biochemistry research at Oakland University. And I loved it, but I realized that, as you can tell, I love to be around people. I love to be social, and just wasn't my calling to be in a lab, 8 or 10 hours a day. So I got involved in psychology because I wanted to help people. But very quickly, I realized that, I had a different calling. And really the defining moment for me was back in 2005, I started a business with some friends of mine called Disability Made Easy, and it was a barrier-free home modification company. So we specialized in taking homes and making them handicap accessible for individuals that either had terminal illness or injury, and very rewarding job. I ran the sales and marketing for the company. But the defining moment, Billy, is I was out at a job with our project manager, and I remember coming up to this home and thinking to myself, man, this is just totally obsolete. There's no way that this home is going to be, suitable for anyone, let alone someone that, is wheelchair bound. So I watched our project manager take out his graph paper and his pen, and in about 45 seconds, just sketched this beautiful front elevation. And from that moment, I realized this idea of being able to take something that's functionally obsolete and modify it to make it suitable to the owner or the future owners. And that really stuck with me for really the rest of my life. And, I kind of would say, fast forward a little bit, a few years later, it was middle of the recession, time for myself and my family to buy our first home. We had an opportunity either to buy something that was move-in ready, right? And I was ready to go, excited about this home. And then I realized that there was a bank-owned property literally on the same street. So I got in touch with the lender, bought the property. Everything was outdated. I mean, we're talking like glitter popcorn ceilings, like, old kitchen, old bathrooms, everything. So I bought the property and instead of hiring a general contractor, I actually contracted out every single trade individually. And I paid everybody a little bit more. And I told them, I'm going to be annoying. I'm going to stick around the job site. I'm going to ask you questions because I want to learn. So that really, that was my canvas and that was my learning experience. And, my friends joke with me, Billy, they said, Dan, what are you going to do when you finish renovating your house? So I kind of half joked back and I said, I'll just buy another one. And that's exactly what I did. I bought another one. Maybe about, 75 homes later, I kind of perfected this art of buying something that was functionally obsolete and then bringing it up to modern standards. So did that, throughout the recession in and around Oakland County. And then which is a suburb of Detroit, as the inventory kind of dried out, I rebranded my company. We called ourselves Renaissance Real Estate Ventures, and we moved into the city of Detroit. We hired, local, individuals from the neighborhoods we worked in, and we did the same thing in the city of Detroit. So, all the while, I'd been doing this kind of as a side job. I had my W-2. I was a business development executive, most recently at Amazon, which is a company everybody knows about. And finally, one day, I had another, aha moment. And that was when I decided to leave Amazon. And at that point in time, I said to myself, how many properties do I need to own and cash flow in order to replace my income? And at that point, the answer was 20. So I went out, I bought 20 properties, raised the capital. I started, renovating these properties, and I realized that I could actually sell them to investors. And that's something I did for a long time, buying property, renovating it, and reselling it often, Billy, to overseas investors or investors that were out of state, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about. So as the years progressed, I was actually recruited by a commercial real estate brokerage to do net lease brokerage, which is what I specialize in today. And at the time, if people asked me what I was doing for a living, I would tell them I was in adult daycare because I was essentially, babysitting contractors. And to juxtapose that with what I do now as a commercial real estate broker, which is incredibly passive and not like it was renovating houses, it's a very big difference. So, I quickly transitioned out of the house flipping and into commercial real estate brokerage. And, that's where I am today.
Fantastic, man. So, there's so many different places that we could kind of take this conversation. I guess the one that you mentioned as from biz dev side of things, business development. So sorry, when you get two salespeople together, this is kind of, you get into the lingo. So business development. So you mentioned you were there at Amazon, and how long ago has that been since you left Amazon?
Oh, gosh, it's been about 4 years, maybe. Yeah, about 4 years.
About 4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's been a pattern of you being able to see things that are either don't exist, things that are maybe broken, and you have this knack for being able to say, okay, well, we need to get this to a very nice finished product,
yes,
or finished service, right? And so before we go there, I guess I'm just curious because you had this burning kind of sensation in your being to move and to do what you're doing now. But do you come from a family that has influence from a real estate perspective, or did you have any of that when you were younger to know about real estate?
Definitely the entrepreneurial aspect. I mean, my father's a business owner. He had his own pharmacy in the city of Detroit. I'm actually first generation American. My parents were both born in refugee camps in Europe after World War II. And, my family does have a history of, through real estate, building wealth and enabling themselves to kind of take themselves and their family to the next level. So it definitely wasn't something that was taught to me per se, but I always knew that, in different parts of my family, people had bought, homes and they had appreciated and they had rented them out and they had, built their wealth and been able to kind of, in many cases, without an education, without experience, and maybe in some cases, not even being able to fluently speak the language, they were able to utilize real estate as a vehicle to propel themselves towards success.
Okay, perfect. So you had some of that on the peripheral, although maybe wasn't necessarily there. And one of the things I believe in, I'm sure, when there's so many different types of education, right? You can have formal education, or you can have from the school of, sometimes they say hard knocks, or just from street smarts. I think a lot of times for those of us who have these college degrees and stuff like that, we forget that you don't always have to have a college degree to be quote unquote successful in life. So also too, you mentioned and here we love to talk about long distance investing because, of course, I've been living in Europe for almost 20 years now, which is unbelievable to even think that I've been here that long. And I've been exclusively investing back in the United States. And you also talked about some of the experience that you had working with those people that were outside of Michigan, right? You said out of state, as well as internationally. So maybe give us a little bit of an insight into what that experience was like in terms of working with people that were not necessarily in your backyard.
Sure. So, Detroit is a very interesting market. Detroit, the city of Detroit itself, little known fact, it's about 7 or 8 years behind the rest of the country in the foreclosure crisis. I should say it was, because we're now, we're over a decade past that, but which is why, by the way, it made sense for me to bring my company into Detroit, because, we had done what we had done in the suburbs, and we saw that trend, and we were able to capitalize on it in the city of Detroit. So really a lot of our end users, and keep in mind, our end users were not necessarily the people we were selling to, because sometimes we would sell to a group and then that group would repackage and resell those homes to another end user. But a lot of those individuals were out of state or out of the country. And that's because the returns in the city of Detroit are just outrageous. I mean, when I say they're outrageous, you could take a typical rental return in another major city in the United States, multiply that by 4 or 5. I mean, and they've gotten lower because prices have appreciated, but definitely during the time that I was doing this, both the appreciation and the return on investment, cash on cash returns for these properties were incredibly lucrative and incredibly desirable for investors out of state and out of the country. And I guess one of the important lessons I learned through doing this is that, if you're an out of state or out of the country investor, it's very important to be familiar with your team. It's very important, if you don't have boots on the ground, to have someone that you trust that's involved in the operation. I can't tell you how many times I witnessed people who were buying a property that had already been bought and resold 3 or 4 times. And now they're in a situation where they're over leveraged. So if they ever wanted to exit that property, the returns look great, right? You can cook numbers any way you want. But at the end of the day, I would never advise someone to buy a property that has, has negative equity. So I would just say, like, to anybody who's viewing this, I think your audience it's very appropriate. Be familiar with your team. Even if you can't be there, you need to have people that you trust to make sure that your assets are being handled in a responsible manner.
So definitely that they're handled in a responsible manner. We're going to come back to this because this is key. Like, one of the things that I love to talk about, or that we talk about here all the time on the Going Long podcast, is really having 3 things in line before you actually get to the specific opportunity. Number 1 is being crystal clear on what it is that you want the asset to provide you. What benefit? Are you looking for equity buildup over time? Are you looking for some type of appreciation? Are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for tax benefits? The stuff that we talk about all the time, right? Then afterwards, you go to the specific location. So if you're looking for one of those benefits, that location, you can find it in Detroit or wherever. We're talking about Detroit today. And then afterwards, and without a doubt, I'm 100% aligned with you, is making sure that you have the right team that understands the location, that has the right ecosystem, that has the things that you need them to perform on. And then lastly, it doesn't matter what the specific opportunity is that you're putting into your portfolio. It could be energy equipment. It could be large pieces of or large multifamily or commercial real estate, or the triple net that we'll talk a bit more about here pretty soon. But the one thing that I do also want to add, just maybe on top of that, was, like, when I read the books were like, well, just invest where you live. Like, just to do that, so you can be the landlord and you can do the things that you want to be able to do. Now, you've been able to build a business and help businesses be built by dealing with people that were outside of the state or outside of the country, right? What I would call long distance. So help us understand, what are some of the main things that you see, or some of the main reasons that a number of people are wanting to invest long distance, or express to you that they're maybe living in Florida, or they're living in France, or living in wherever, and they want to be able to invest specifically long distance in Detroit? What were some of those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, simply put, the number one reason would be either the appreciation, or more likely in this case, the return on investment. I mean, if you're looking at markets that are providing single-digit returns, and in Detroit we're talking 20 or 30% returns, that's going to be attractive to investors, is that, the buying power, right? The, average price of a rental home in the city of Detroit, at least several years ago, might've been $30,000 or $35,000, where in other markets, it could have been $100,000 or $150,000. And then again, the cash on cash return, that same house that someone's buying for $35,000 might be rented out for $1,000 a month. Not too different from the property that's, costs $100,000 or $150,000. So it would definitely be, purchasing power and return on investment.
Cool. Purchasing power, return on investment. These are some of the additional criteria that also you were finding that people said, oh, this makes sense for me to start to look beyond my backyard to start to build a team that's in a specific location. Go right ahead.
Absolutely. And the same thing in a sense applies, as a net lease investment sales broker. I sell property all over the country, and I sell it to investors that are all over the country and all over the world. And in many cases, especially today with such a hot market and such a tight inventory supply, many people will look outside of their backyard for a variety of reasons. Number one, with what I'm doing now, we're talking about absolutely passive investments, right? No landlord responsibilities whatsoever. The tenant pays for the taxes, the insurance, any maintenance, any management, whatever goes wrong, it's all on the tenant. So in those cases, investing out of your backyard is very much the same as investing in your backyard. And because the market is so hot and inventory is so tight, somebody might have specific parameters that they're looking for, and they're willing to go out of state because they just can't find them in their local market.
And so these are things that are fantastic music to our ears here on the Going Long podcast, and also helps to explain and understand why people would look beyond their location. You talked about something that is also, I think, really, really critical. And this is, you're taking into consideration the difference between an active investor, right, and a passive investor. But at the same time, you're also saying, well, look, either one can be done long distance. When you talk, but the other thing that I do want to dive into, because this is something that's right in your wheelhouse, and you're also going to help the Going Long family to understand more about the world of the net lease investing, right? Mm-hmm. We've had maybe one or two people that have talked a little bit about it, but can you help us understand, Dan, just at a very base level? Like, I'm listening, and maybe this is the first time I'm ever finding out about what is this net lease investing all about? And you talked about certain types of clients and babysitting and things like that. But, I'm an IT sales professional. I'm a telco sales professional. I'm really busy, but this kind of I'm curious more about this. Give us the 101 level, what it is, and why would this potentially be interesting for someone who is let's call it a passive investor this time.
Sure. So, I believe everything's in a name, right? So we can look at the name Net Lease Properties, right? So in order to better understand what they are, I'd like to contrast them with something like multifamily. So let's say that you've got a net lease property. Let's call it a Wendy's property, okay? And Wendy's is paying $125,000 of rent. So the reason we call it a net lease property is that $125,000 of annual rent is net to the investor. Let's contrast that with a small multifamily that also has a rental rate of $125,000 a year. Now, that $125,000 a year of rent is gross collected rent. So what that means is that in the multifamily property, you've got $125,000 of income, but you've also got another line on your profit and loss report, right? And that's your expenses. So you might have things like a management fee. You might have vacancy. You might have capital expenditures, right? You might need a new roof. You might need to replace a boiler. You might need to replace windows. Right. In addition, you're going to have, maybe utilities, you'll have taxes, you'll have insurance, you'll have other management and maintenance fees. You might have to replace a parking lot. You might have to mow the grass. You might have to plow the snow. So at the end of the day, in many multifamily properties, that $125,000 of gross income, after you take away the expenses could be about 50% of the gross collected rents. So that $125,000 becomes, maybe $60,000, $65,000. With a net lease property, the $125,000 of annual income, that's your bottom line. There are zero expenses. So believe it or not, the tenant, okay, the Wendy's operator, right, or the Starbucks or the Walgreens or whoever the tenant is, the tire store, they're actually paying your taxes. They're paying your insurance. They're paying for any repairs whatsoever, and they're paying for any maintenance, right? They're paying to plow the snow. They're paying to cut the grass. So $125,000 that's guaranteed in the lease, that's your bottom line. There's also a lot of more inherent stability, right? If you have a lease with an individual tenant, let's say that tenant decides not to pay rent, right? Or that tenant goes through bankruptcy, or that tenant disappears. Now you're on the hook to release that property. Whereas with a net lease investment, typically we're dealing with major national tenants, like I named some names before. who often have hundreds, if not thousands of locations. So even if that location goes out of business or they stop operating, it goes dark, they're still going to be paying you rent. So believe it or not, I deal with properties that have been vacant for years and will continue to be vacant for years, where the guarantor on the lease, this major national company, is still paying the rent. So you have a very clear picture of what your property is going to be doing for you at every step of the way. In addition, almost all leases have built-in rental escalations, which are used to hedge against inflation. So you might have 1% annually, you could have 2% annually, maybe 7.5% every 5 years. There's many different ways to skin the cat in terms of rental escalations, but regardless, those are put into the lease to hedge against inflation. So the assets are very stable, they're very secure, and they're very certain. We know what to expect. In addition, they're typically very well located. Many times they're located on hard signalized intersections. So the real estate itself is incredibly valuable.
So there's a couple of things to think about, and actually, before we even get there, I do have one question, because I know a number of the Going Long family is thinking to themselves, okay, well, Dan, it absolutely makes sense. You're talking about the revenue, so the revenue comes in, the $125,000. Then on the net lease, you're going to have $125,000 actually is net, as it states, that's what comes in, and then when we walk through the example, we talk about a lot of the expenses, but specifically those are the operating expenses, right? And so once we get to that operating expense, then we're going to get to our net operating income. And then from there, we're also going to have some type of a debt service, which could mean that we potentially have even less on a residential. Is the same thing affected? How do the financing expenses affect that 125?
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of properties are bought in cash. A lot of them are financed. But, typically if you're looking at a property that's financed, you're going to get similar types of terms. In fact, many times they'll be better because, you've got a large national tenant. The stability is there. It's a guaranteed lease, right? The leases are typically 15 or 20 years at their origin. And, you can also underwrite a property in that way. I like to underwrite all my properties as if someone's paying cash, because I don't know what a borrower's terms are going to be until I put them in touch with our lender. So every time I underwrite a property, I look at it, what is the cash on cash, unlevered cash on cash return? But yeah, you're right. If someone is going to get source debt and put it on their property, then yeah, debt service will be considered, a factor in their, in terms of their balance sheet. But what is also important to recognize is that, as you know, when you lever a property, the levered returns goes up significantly, because now you're only putting a portion of the total, equity or the price of the property, out of pocket. And especially today with rates being at near record lows, it does make sense in many cases to leverage a property.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you also too going through clarifying that and just giving us the context so people understand how that example works. Also wanted to know, so one of the things that in your space would play a lot is this thing called the 1031 exchange. Now there are a bunch of different things that are out there, but I happen to know in this area that they tend to be more seen. Can you maybe talk to us about, Dan, what is the 1031 exchange, and also how they are being used specifically with the goal of being able to help to increase the trading of assets?
Sure, absolutely. So the IRS code 1031 allows for a 1031 exchange. Now, people think about these things as like loopholes or backdoors, but they're not. They're not at all. This is tax code that's designed specifically to be utilized, and it's not a backdoor. It's not illegal. It's not shady. Nothing like that. So our business is a huge business, right? My brokerage, just our brokerage alone, does about $800 million of net lease transactions a year. This year, fingers crossed, I think we're going to cross $1 billion annually, which is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Approximately 37% of our transactions, probably more at this point, are 1031 related. So it's an incredibly important part of our business. And the reason that it's so important to the industry, in addition to our business, is that it allows an individual to buy a property, right? So let's just say you buy a property $1 million. You hold it for a number of years and now it's worth $2 million. Well, we could look at two different scenarios. We could look at scenario A with the 1031 exchange, where you now sell that property and you have $1 million of gain. So now you can take that full $2 million and put it into a new property, right? In scenario B, that $1 million of gain is taxed. And just for argument's sake, let's say it's taxed at 35%. So now instead of an additional $1 million of equity to reinvest, you're dealing with only $650,000. Okay, great. So that's level one. But now we talked about financing, right? Let's assume that you can get, just for argument's sake, a mortgage where you're going to put a third down, right? Maybe you can get a mortgage where you put a fourth down, 25%. Maybe we'll go with that example. Mm-hmm. So keep in mind the difference in example A and example B was $350,000. But if you take that and you multiply it by 4, now you're dealing with $1.4 million. So you, in scenario A with the 1031, you actually have $1.4 million of increased purchasing power than you do without the 1031 exchange. Now that's just an iteration number one. What if in 5 years you go ahead and sell that building and do it again, and then sell that building over and over and over again? And the adage in our industry is 1031 until you die. And the reason for that is that you can take that $1 million and then defer taxes and do it with the 2 million and keep going over and over and over again. When a person dies and the properties go and are passed on to their heirs, we now use what's called a stepped up tax basis, which means that the property is reevaluated at the time that it's inherited, and the new tax basis is the new value of the property. So now you just start all over in the next generation. It's really an incredible tool to build generational wealth. And in addition to the benefits to the investor, let's talk about the trickle-down impacts to the entire economy, right? What about brokers like myself? 37% of our transactions are 1031 related. What about the inspectors and the appraisers and the environmental people and the title companies? Everybody that's involved in the transaction. I mean, we're talking tens of billions of dollars of transactional, dollars that are accounted for every year as it pertains to the 1031 exchange. So it's really an integral part, not only of our economy, of our business, but also of the American economy. I mean, it's a vehicle that allows us to basically incentivize commerce and incentivize transactions. So really important vehicle, and really something that I hope and pray will stay intact, in the years to come. It is, by the way, over 100 years old, so hopefully it'll live to see its future birthdays.
Well, we hope that it stays around for quite a long time and it stays intact in the way that it is, and yes, so we would like to be able to continue to see that. And as it relates to the 1031 exchange, and I just want to say this, right? And I know the Going Long family, like you all know this already, but I'm just going to say it. Like Dan just gave an example. Dan by no way, shape, or form was giving anybody any tax advice. He was just giving a simple example of how he's seen this work in the past. And in order to understand how this can apply to you in your specific situation, make sure that you speak to your tax professional, because that would be the best thing. But he's once again helping us with real life with real things that he's seen in his life. So with that, Dan, also, man, one of the things that I do want to ask you, because like getting to speak to someone who is not only an educator, but also is in the sales profession as well. You didn't actually mention earlier that you studied sales as a profession. I think you said you were going to study a BA of psychology, I believe is what you said in the very beginning. So was that right? I did say that correctly?
Yeah. But my degree is in psychology, yes. Okay,
perfect. So how in the world did you get into the sales profession, man?
I mean, look, sales is psychology, right? Human nature is psychology. So I'm as much as I'm not a psychology professional, I am fortunate and thankful that I got a degree in psychology. And I would tell you that some of my favorite books, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later, are business and sales psychology books, because I think that if you can understand the psychology of the human being, you can better relate to them and you can better sell to them. So, I think that sales is just something I was always in as a job. And it's something I've always loved. I love people. I love helping people. I love adding value. And, for me, it's just that's my nature. My nature is to be selling something.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, when you are selling something, right, you are helping an idea. I've been in the sales profession for 24 years. It's something that I absolutely love and done it across the globe, Europe, Middle East, and Africa most recently. And when you are in the sales profession and you are doing what I believe the sales profession was placed here to do, which is help people solve their problems and provide them with solutions, it's the most honorable profession that exists on planet Earth, right? Because you're always helping people to solve their challenges with the right solution. Sometimes you have that solution, and many times you're pointing people in the direction of someone that's part of your ecosystem or your network that can provide them with the correct solution. But I was just curious about whenever I get a chance to speak and chew the fat with other sales professionals, kind of what got you here. So, I would be absolutely remiss if I did not ask you about your most recent educational venture, which is a CRE Pro course.
Yes.
And so help us understand, like, I know what it is. And since you're the CEO, help us understand, what is the CRE Pro course, and who is this really meant to help?
Yeah. So the CRE Pro course is essentially a one-stop shop. It's designed to be kind of a soup to nuts in terms of giving people everything they need to know to become top commercial real estate brokers. So we go through everything. We teach you how to, basically a background about different asset classes. We give you, and you'll hear my one of my kids in the background, but we give you a background about different asset classes, different types of brokerage. We teach you about the industry from an investing perspective. And then we teach you how to database, how to select tenants, how to cold call. We give you cold call scripts. We teach you how to create marketing material, how to navigate representation agreements, listing contracts, letters of intent, purchase and sale agreements. We essentially give you everything that you need to know to become a top commercial real estate broker. What's interesting, Billy, is that the course is designed for individuals who are coming into the commercial real estate brokerage industry, or who have been in the industry for less than 5 years. Maybe they're transitioning from residential, or just individuals who are already in the industry but are not making as much money as they'd like. But we also have found that a significant number of commercial real estate investors who have no desire to be brokers have taken the course, because the feedback that they've given us is that they, if they want to be successful, or they want to be more successful as a commercial real estate investor, they want to learn how to think like a broker. So essentially, we've created a course that's a one-stop shop to help people advance their careers in the commercial real estate investing space.
Fantastic. And so it's looking to advance your career in the commercial real estate investing space, looking to learn more about how the broker would think, even if you're an investor, and if you're looking to also make a pivot, if you're looking to go from residential into commercial real estate, then this seems like one of the best places to be able to go. So appreciate you sharing that with us, and also, Dan, just to being able to take the time and the effort to be able to put something like that together. So I guess one last thing. I do have one last question before we get involved in the going along final three. And one of the things I'm going to say to everyone is make sure that you go over to Dan's website. He's going to tell us a little bit more about it here pretty soon. And because I've been there, and it's really cool to see like all the different locations where his company is actually impacting and helping to connect investors and sellers and buyers and things like that. But I always love seeing multiple states or multiple geographies, and definitely head over there, Going Along family. And speaking of which, like, let's say I'm a guy, I'm in Barcelona, Spain, and I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, Dan, or I'm listening to you, and you're helping to educate me on this net lease space. You just talked about this thing called the 1031 exchange, which just sounds like something that would be really, really cool. Not just making more money, but keeping more money as one of the potential tools that I could use. So I can talk to my tax professional about that. But I don't actually live anywhere, but I want to talk to you. So tell me, like, what does it look like? What's the process look like for someone who has a desire to get involved in this space? You're talking to me about it now, but what's the process look like to engage with you?
Now, do you mean as an investor to work with me as a broker, or someone who wants to get into the brokerage space?
No, as an investor.
Yeah, sure. So, I have clients all over the world, and, if somebody wants to learn more about commercial real estate investing in the net lease space, they can reach out to me. And, typically, if somebody has property that they might want to sell, the first thing that we do is we offer a complimentary no obligation value proposal. So myself and my team, we put together a very thorough, in-depth report that lets you know down to the dollar what your property is worth. We do that for all of our clients whenever they want. So if that's you, definitely reach out, and I'm happy to help. If you're a buyer, then you can also reach out. What I like to do is get to know my buyers and understand what their goals are, understand what they're looking for. And then once we kind of narrow that down, I'll start sending you on and off market inventory. And the process at that point is a process of feedback. And you'll tell me, I like this, but it needs to be a little bit more money. I like this, but it needs to be a little bit higher cap rate. I like this, but it needs to be a little bit, better demographics, et cetera, et cetera. And through that process, I really get to know what the investor is looking for, and can eventually place them into the investment vehicle that's best suited for them.
Fantastic. And so this is just to make it very simplified. So I'm looking to be a part of, or purchase a single leased facility, or I'm looking to buy one. Get in touch with Dan, your team, and this is the way to best go about that.
Absolutely. We do sell shopping centers as well. So we do sell multi-tenant properties as well.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Sounds great. Well, we'll get to come back to more of that here just very, very soon. But you know what, Dan, like the thing is, I've got to get us to the going long final three. And I never, ever, ever ask anybody the going long final three unless you tell me that you're ready. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Oh, I knew that was going to be the answer, man. I knew you were going to be ready. You were born ready. So here we go. So you know what? We started with you over in Detroit on your side of the pond. And now that I've adopted this side of the pond as my home, I would love to bring everybody back to Europe. So help me understand, Dan, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or still on your bucket list to visit?
Okay, great. So I don't know if you necessarily can consider it Europe, but maybe we'll try to find a way. But I actually love Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem for 4 years, and I love the culture. And I love the synergy of the modern and the historic / ancient. So Jerusalem is a phenomenal city. I would say that that's definitely my number one.
All right, fantastic. So another vote for Jerusalem. So there we go. And now question number 2, and this is always one that's a little bit challenging, but I know you're up for the challenge here. So the thing is I've recognized this pattern with really successful people, Dan, and you're a successful person. And the thing is with really successful people, like one of the reasons that they're really successful is because they've only made one mistake in their entire trajectory, which is why they get, I always tell myself I'm going to get that right. And every single time I get it wrong. Maybe that's by design. All right, here we go. So no, the thing is, look, everybody makes mistakes. They have learning opportunities, whatever the case may be. And what I've noticed about really successful people, not only do they typically make a lot more than everybody else, but they do something that is very, very different. And the pattern that I've noticed is that those people that continue to be successful and continue to achieve really take a moment to learn a lesson from each and every one of these events, failure events, mistakes, whatever you want to call them. So I would love for you to share, what is the one lesson that you've learned as a result of a previous mistake or learning opportunity that you would want to share with the Going Long family to really help make sure that we're moving in the right direction moving forward?
Sure. It's a great question. So I would say that for a large portion of my life, I suffered from what I call shiny object syndrome. And it really would knock me off track, and it would really sabotage my success. And I think that really is the essence of it. And I'll talk about that in a second. But really the turning point for me was at a certain point, I bought a number of properties, and a lot of them were incredibly successful. You know, we bought them, we renovated, and we resold them. But some of them were not. And unfortunately, I spread myself too thin. I got excited. I bought a lot of properties at one time, and, it was hard to manage. And I ended up, significantly, affecting my operation in a negative sense. And at that point, I really said to myself, this is it, man. It's time to grow up. It's time to learn from this experience. And it's time to really double down and focus on one thing. And at that point, that's when I made that transition into net lease investment sales brokerage. I said to myself, I'm going to focus on this one thing. I'm going to sell off my rental portfolio. I'm going to focus on this one thing until I'm an expert at it. And really, for me, it enabled me to take all of my energy and invest it into one narrow focus and become an expert. And during that process, things came up, right? And I got excited, and I thought, hey, this is great. Let me, take advantage of this thing or take advantage of that thing. But I really, exhibited that self-control and said, nope, not until I become an expert. And really, for me, I think that made a huge difference. And that was a turning point for me. As I mentioned a moment ago, I really started thinking about it and started diving deep and saying, why do I do that? What is the reason psychologically, right? What's going on? What reward am I getting? And the answer is that I had become very successful, but then I would sabotage my success. And I'd work really hard to get back up there and get a little bit higher and then sabotage it. And I said to myself, Dan, you got a lot of energy. Why are you wasting your energy with these peaks and valleys? Life is always going to have peaks and valleys, right? But there's no reason to create more valleys than necessary. And ever since then, my success and my happiness and all that good stuff has just really taken off. So that's the lesson that I learned.
Fantastic. So become an expert, keep the focus, keep moving forward, and then these positive results will begin to appear. So which is fantastic. So this brings us to the final of the Going Long Final 3. And you know what? The thing is, Dan, always love to help to feed the brain here. And so would love for you to share with the Going Long family, what is the one book that you would recommend?
Definitely, it would be Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. This book is so good that I've got a partner of mine who was at my house one time, And he took me aside, no joke. And he said, you got to get this book off your shelf. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, don't let anybody see this thing, man. This is like the gold standard. Like, don't let it. And I said, no, I'm an abundance mentality guy, but this book is so good. And it's like we were talking about before. Sales is about psychology. Persuasion is about psychology. So Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Incredible book. I love it. There's just some fundamentals to sales psychology that can be found in this book. It's a pile of gold.
Wow, man. So I'm a big fan of Cialdini's influence as well. And he's got other ones, Persuasion, all that kind of stuff, but yes, we'll definitely include that in the show notes, Dan. And, I always look at the watch, man. And I know you've got your podcast as well. And so these conversations just like fly by. And I cannot believe we're already at the end of the conversation, man, because we started out with you talking about what you were doing in like your BA in psychology in 2006. And then you went from there, and then you had a couple things and some changes. And then afterwards you decided, well, you started getting into, you bought a property a little bit while, and then you bought another one, and you bought another one, and you were focused on like taking things that weren't really looking very nice, and you put a process to making sure that they were nice. And then you started building teams, and then you started getting a greater vision, and then you started realizing that you had a real knack for this kind of stuff. And so not only are you continuing to help connect people across the globe and across the United States, you've also taken that sales perspective, that relationship building perspective, and now you are even helping other people to get educated in the commercial real estate space with your course. And I know that after this conversation, like so many people are like, oh my gosh, this Dan dude is awesome. I got to find out more about what they're doing. I'm thinking about some investments. I've got this friend who wants to sell a property that's a net lease property. And so they want to know, how in the world can I get in touch with you, Dan? How can I find out more about you? So can you please help us know from the Going Long family, what's the best way to get in touch with you, with your team, and find out more about what you're doing?
Sure. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you know. So you can find me, first name Dan, last name Lewkowicz, Lewkowicz. You can also check out our website, www.creprocourse.com, if you want more information about the course. Also happy to give out my cell phone for anybody who wants more information about the course, has a property they want evaluated, wants to buy commercial property, or just wants to talk shop in life or real estate. My number is 248-943-2838. Again, 248-943-2838. Love to connect with more people and happy to add value in any way I can.
Fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. And also, by the way, Dan is super active on LinkedIn. And when you connect with him, because like everybody needs to reach out and connect with Dan, right? And when you do that, just remind Dan that you were listening and or watching him here on the Going Long podcast. It's going to make it so much easier for the two of you to continue the conversation because, well, Dan will just know where you showed up from. And you also are showing interest in taking a couple seconds to connect with them. So listen, Dan, I appreciate you very much. I appreciate you investing your time with me and the entire Going Long family. And thank you very much, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, cool. Dan, if you give me just a couple seconds, I just want to say a couple of quick words to the Going Long family. Make this really fast. Listen, Dan left it all here and he shared so much. And so make sure that you take the opportunity to share today's episode with at least 2-3 other people. You will be that person that makes a positive impact on somebody else's life because you know someone who has net lease properties. They want to buy them. They want to sell them. And you know what? You have that opportunity. At the same time, if you could take just a couple seconds to leave an honest review of today's conversation, would really appreciate that. I take each one of these very seriously, continue to go out, read, and make sure that we're doing everything to make the podcast exactly what you want. And it also helps to attract really awesome guests like Dan. So make sure you take a couple seconds, an honest written review and a rating. And then with that being said, I'm really looking forward to welcoming you back on the very next conversation. And until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.
Wow, don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? When I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long-distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.